We're officially under 1 month away from Apple unveiling the biggest iPhone update in over a decade. So today I want to go over the latest leaks and rumors for iOS 19, as over the past few weeks we've heard a ton of new info that has given us our best look yet at what Apple's been working on. And the answer is a lot. First up, the redesign for this year is absolutely happening. We have now heard this from multiple independent sources, and they all keep echoing that not only is it happening on the iPhone, it's also happening on the iPad and the Mac at the same time. Yet again, we've heard Apple's inspiration for the redesign comes from Vision OS, or the software that runs on the $3,500 Apple Vision Pro, and up until this point, we had only seen an early alpha build of iOS 19. But honestly, it didn't show us all that much, and it certainly didn't look like the big redesign that we had been promised. But since then, there's been a way bigger leak more recently that shows us new parts of iOS 19, new icons, and other UI changes that Apple is making. So per usual, we recreated all of it ourselves to give you your best look yet. So based off of everything I've seen so far, if there's one word that describes iOS 19, it's fun. I think in recent history, iOS, the current version, has become so sterile and professional and boring, where iOS 19 alternatively is a breath of fresh air. Just starting on the lock screen, the toggles here at the bottom have this shine to them as they float above the rest of your content. They're even said to respond in real time to moving your device around with the gyroscope, and I really see Apple leaning into that with a lot of the elements throughout the system. Even toggles in the Settings app look more modern. They're slimmer now, and they fit into part of the interface without taking up so much space. The biggest visual change, though, will probably be the icons on the home screen. There's been a question forever, will Apple go full circular with iOS 19? And we now know the answer is kind of. They're no longer rounded rectangles, but they're not entirely circle. I'm calling them squircular icons right now. Personally, I really like the way that these look, and as soon as I saw them, they felt very Apple-y right off the bat. But as it is like one of the first things you will see after updating, I definitely think this is going to be somewhat controversial, especially considering the fact that the icons fundamentally on the iPhone have never changed in history, and all of a sudden they're going to look totally different. And to be clear, with this redesign, Apple's not just doing the icons or an app or two. This is system-wide, and we've seen some examples of where they're applying these changes to. We've now seen an even newer version of the updated camera app with a larger viewfinder, and Apple relocating a lot of your toggles down to a new menu drawer at the bottom of your display, which I think looks a lot better than the current Cameras app. Here's the hoping. Apple also revamps the Photos app, which has kind of been a disaster from day one. Universally, it's the comment I see the most everywhere, that the current Photos app most people find unusable, and I would agree it's not great, although so far there have not been any concrete rumors that it's getting updated with iOS 19, but I bet it is. That's all I'm gonna say. I bet that the Photos app in iOS 19, it does get fixed. I'll leave it there for now. Although out of everything we've seen for iOS 19, there's one quality of life change that I am looking forward to the most, and that is Apple redesigning the tab bar at the bottom of all of their apps. Rather than being fixed down at the bottom of your screen as it has been historically, it now floats above your content, and this has given Apple some flexibility to also bring the search tab down to the bottom now too. See, on current iPhones that are pretty big, it's hard with one hand to reach the search icon and use the elements at the very top of your display, but with this change, they're making them so much more reachable and usable, and in the leaks that we've seen, the experience already looks so much better, and I cannot wait to play with it when it's actually out. Basically, if you had any doubt that Apple was doing a massive design overhaul this year, it is actually happening, and yeah, it's going to be controversial. I'm kind of excited for that. Now, as part of iOS 19, Apple will also likely be updating the Find My app with their new design language, and that's why I partnered up with Ugreen, who sponsored today's video. This is the Ugreen Find Track Smart Finder, which is an item tracker that is Apple Find My certified. That means it's super easy to set up. You just go to the Find My app, and within seconds, you can connect it and see it alongside all of your devices. A single iPhone can support up to 32 different finders and support sharing with up to 5 different devices. You can track your lost item anywhere in the world using the Find My app, and when it is close, you can play up to an 80 decibel sound to locate it quickly. Additionally, there's also left behind reminders, so if you go a certain distance from your item, you'll get a notification on your phone letting you know you forgot it. Ugreen's tracker tags can last up to 2 years before you have to replace the battery, and you can even see the battery at any time inside of the Find My app. Or for a totally different form factor, there's the Find Track Slim Smart Finder, which is about the size of a credit card. It is razor thin, and it fits perfectly in your their wallet. So use my link down below in the description to get a discount on one of Ugreen's smart finders. A huge thank you to Ugreen for sponsoring this one. Now let's get back to it. Now, on top of the iPhone, iPadOS 19 is also getting redesigned, but recently we've heard about some way bigger changes coming to the iPad this year that could be the biggest moment for the iPad also in a decade. According to a new report, Apple has 3 big goals for the iPad this year: improving multitasking, improving productivity, and improving app window management. Now, I'll be honest, we've heard this before. We've heard Apple's going to fix the iPad, and then we get something like Stage Manager, where they sort of tried something new, but it was ultimately a failure because it didn't work very well. Now, the initial report in particular doesn't outline anything specific, but one sketchy rumor says that, well, basically, when you have your iPad separate, it'll work more like a tablet. But the second that you dock it on something like the Apple Magic Keyboard, you would now get a menu bar that appears at the top, similar to how apps on the Mac work, where you have way easier access to menus and options right at the top, always in front of you, where right now to access any of that, it's all hidden on the iPad. To me, it does feel like the iPad has been a pretty stagnant software product for way longer than it should have been. So at the very least, we feel due for something this year. Whether or not Apple fixes the iPad is left to be seen, but I guess I'm hopeful. Now, moving back to the iPhone, we also have a very sketchy rumor about multitasking on here with iOS 19. According to this leak, Apple's planning to supercharge iPhones with a USB-C port, and that if you have an external Apple display, like the Studio display, for example, in iOS 19, you'd be able to plug in a Thunderbolt cable from your iPhone to the display and basically turn your iPhone into a full-on mini computer, as you're said to add a keyboard and mouse and get a Stage Manager-like experience where you can manage windows and do bigger actions, again, based all off of the hardware processor in your iPhone. Now, Samsung's had this feature for a long time on their phones. It's called Samsung DeX, where you can basically blow up the operating system and do more computer-like tasks when you connect to an external display. But I just don't see Apple doing this. Why would they want to cannibalize the sales of an iPad or a Mac? I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying if you're Apple, what's the motivation here? Yeah, I'd love to be wrong about this one, but I just don't see it happening. Next up though, if there is one part of iOS 19 that I think people are curious about more than anything else, it's what Apple does with AI and Apple Intelligence this year. Particularly considering that their first big step into AI has been broadly a failure, and they're not even done rolling out the features that they had previously promised, including that smarter Siri that understands your personal context. Well, one, it definitely sounds like Apple's promises this year will be way smaller, and two, that they're also going to be outsourcing even more of the work to third parties. According to the CEO of Google himself, they are actively in talks with Apple to add Google Gemini to the iPhone around the middle of this year, which is coincidentally exactly when Apple will be unveiling iOS 19 to the public. Now, for Apple as a company, working with a third party for a major feature is pretty out of character for them, but we first saw them do it with ChatGPT last year, and users generally seem to have liked this. So with iOS 19, not only is Apple working to add Google Gemini to work with Siri and other parts of the iPhone, but it sounds like other third-party tools will be added to the iPhone potentially at the same time. There's so many different AI models that do different things now, and Apple knows they're behind a bit, so they're just working directly with them rather than trying to compete, which I think is probably the right answer. But on top of that, there's one other major AI change that could be happening with iOS 19, and that's in regards to the default search engine on the iPhone. In a recent court proceeding, an Apple executive confirmed that for the first time ever, Google search on the iPhone has declined, with users spending less time there and likely heading to a ChatGPT or AI for answers. And this apparently has led Apple to consider replacing Google search with ChatGPT directly or Google Gemini directly, which I cannot overstate how big of a deal this would be, especially considering that $20 billion of Apple's revenue does come directly from a search deal with Google. So it's not guaranteed that Apple 100% changes this with iOS 19, but the fact that they're already thinking about it and closely paying attention to users' behavior shows that they're really not afraid to switch it over to a AI default, especially with a moderate percentage of users already already doing that. It's pretty interesting. And if nothing else, I think interesting is going to be the theme of iOS 19 with the redesign, with the changes Apple's making on the iPad, with their second attempt of AI and new features. This year's WWDC happening on Monday, June 9th is going to be a big one. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date on iOS 19, and drop a like if you enjoyed this video or you learned something new. It super helps me and the channel out. Okay, I've been Sam. This is we're getting close to my favorite time of the year every year. I love this middle event that Apple does, and more leaks and rumors to come as we get closer. You can bet on that. That's all for now. I've been Sam. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.